Edward Cullen and Stefan Salvatore. Two immortal men who fell in love with teenage girls and arguably changed their lives for the worse. They both have their faults, but if we were to directly compare the two, who was the worst vampire romance love interest? That's what we're going to find out today. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Reulerverse, where I give writing commentary and tell otherworldly, super unique stories. You should check them out. Today we are covering a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is vampire love interests. I absolutely adore vampire media. It's literally my favorite thing to read and watch, but man, can it be absolutely terrible. The writing is a disaster way more often than not, and unfortunately, Twilight and the Vampire Diaries are no exception to this. I just covered Bella and Elena, comparing them to see who was the worst, and you guys loved that video. Like, thank you so much. Currently, that is my most viewed video, like, by far. So today, we are going to be focusing on the main men of these shows. At least they're the main characters at first. I know that Elena switches to Damon later on. Trust me, Damon will be getting his own video. We're going to put these two men's problematic behavior under the microscope to figure out which one is worse. Let's talk about Edward Cullen and Stefan Salvatore. For those who don't know or are less familiar with Edward and Stefan, they are the main love interests of Twilight and the Vampire Diaries respectively. And if you've been living under a rock, Twilight is an extremely famous movie series based on books by Stephanie Meyers, while The Vampire Diaries is another extremely popular TV show by the CW and based on books by L.J. Smith. Looking between the two series, there's no denying that they are extremely similar to each other, especially with their characters. That's why I do these comparison videos. Not to mention, I like to see who comes on top when I compare two characters from similar franchises side by side. So with that background information out of the way, let's get to the meat of this video. The hot vampires that are too good to be true. Edward Cullen. We'll start with Twilight's love interest, of course. Edward is a 104-year-old vampire who has remained physically and mentally the age of 17 since the 1900s. It is stated in both the books and movies that he and his family moved to the small town of Forks in 2003, 2 years before Bella did. It wasn't their first time in town though. They were residents in 1936 as well, but had to leave so no one would notice that they do not age. The reason for the return to Forks was simple. They wanted to be closer to the Cullen tribe, which are the werewolves of Jacob's clan, and they love the cloudy weather. It makes it easier for them to blend in with humans. Everyone in Edward's family is married except for him. Don't ask me why a man like him would not realistically be single, especially considering his advanced age. Like, come on, at least give him a couple of exes, that would make more sense. Regardless, being the only single one in his family makes Edward feel extremely lonely and left out. He tells himself he has no interest in dating though, as he hates what he is and believes he doesn't deserve love. Enter Bella. One day, a mysterious new girl shows up at his school. Edward and his family are pretending to be high schoolers because the younger they identify as, the longer they can stay in a given place. He's minding his own business in science class when the girl walks in and sits next to him, and her scent. It's intoxicating. Edward isn't sure why, but he cannot stop fantasizing about unaliving this girl. She smells way better than a normal human. He realizes that if this girl is to survive, he needs to stay far away from her. So he leaves the first chance he gets. Wow, off to a great start, I see. He's Bella's love interest and he is already the greatest danger in her life. Like, I get that when he holds himself back later, it's considered to be romantic, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel a little bit of something when I read those scenes. But overall, this whole situation actually made me quite uncomfortable in both the books and movies. There are many other ways to achieve this dangerous enemies to lovers effect without the love interest acting this way. I digress though. We're not talking about Bella and Edward's relationship, we're talking about Edward's character. Naturally, Bella is confused as to why Edward seems so repelled by her, so she confronts him. The man does not give her a straight answer though, which makes her curious. Edward knows he should not be entertaining her questions, but he does it anyway, because there is another curious part about this girl. He cannot read her mind. Oh yeah, by the way, the vampires in this franchise actually have magical abilities. Not all of them have one, but some do, and each ability is unique to each individual vampire. The lore in that is actually really cool, and I wish it was expanded upon. It's like barely touched on. But yeah, that is indeed a thing. Edward can read the minds of everybody around him, which is likely why he's such a recluse. I mean, I would go absolutely insane if I was forced to hear everybody's thoughts at once and could not turn it off. Speaking of insane, now that we've laid the groundwork for Edward's backstory, I should definitely talk about his personality. Let's not go too deep into the lore here. I'll start with this. Unlike with Bella, there is actually a huge difference in how Edward is portrayed in the books and movies. And for context, I actually read all of the Twilight series, I read the Gender Bend, and I also read part of the spin-off that's coming out. I believe the first book is called Midnight Sun. And in the books, Edward is flirty, clever, and extremely unhinged. Seeing the man's horrifying fantasies of Bella when he first met her made me feel like I was reading the point of view of a villain, not the love interest. And honestly, I had to put Midnight Sun down halfway through reading it because I just could not handle it anymore. For personal reasons, mostly. It's not because it was bad. I actually think Stephenie Meyer's prose is really good and one of the biggest strengths of her writing. But yeah, I had a crazy ex who did a lot of things similar to Edward, and trust me, that is not fun in real life. This type of enemies to lovers story is definitely something that only works in fiction. But you don't even need to read Midnight Sun to know this man is psychotic. His behavior in the main series is evidence enough, from the way he goes back and forth between rejecting and talking to Bella, to him literally breaking into her room and watching her sleep. This man is a danger to himself and others, and it's a wonder Bella survived her relationship with him. Well, technically she didn't, but that's a story for another time. Meanwhile, in the movies, we get less insight into Edward's personality, but I'll tell you, the character comes off completely different. I remember rewatching the movies with my friends. We made a fun little drinking game out of it. It was awesome. And we discussed the plot and characters together. We all agreed that in the movies, Edward comes off less like a flirty, obsessive stalker and more like a creepy yet kind of earnest guy who in the end cares for Bella more than anyone else. I feel like a scene that really illustrates this massive difference in character is the one in the school office. It's an insignificant scene where Edward is asking the lady at the desk if he can switch classes because he doesn't want to be near Bella. In the movie, he aggressively demands that his class be switched, and the woman says she cannot do that. Frustrated, he walks away, brushing past Bella. In the books, though, this scene plays out completely differently. Edward leans over the counter, flashes a perfect smile, and flirts with the lady, trying to convince her to change his class. Bella watches in complete and utter horror as the lady is unable to hide her blushing face because vampires are so beautiful and seductive that nobody can resist them. Then Edward spots Bella, and he casually leaves. Their following interactions and resulting love story also feel very different. While in the movies it feels like Edward is forcing himself to talk to Bella, in the books he's playful, witty, and loves to say things that get under her skin. They regularly mess with each other, and Edward especially loves making fun of Bella's terrible old truck, offering to take her in his nice Volvo because he's afraid she's going to get herself killed in such a hunk of junk. I even remember a scene in the books that was completely cut out of the movies, by the way, where Edward cut in front of Bella in traffic. They were like leaving school, and she could see his reflection in his rear view mirror as he was laughing hysterically at her when she had to hit the brakes really hard to keep from rear-ending him. Bella became enraged at this and honked at him with everything she had. She honked very, very loud, which in turn only made Edward laugh even harder. I mean, talk about hilarious. When I first read the books, I expected the characters to be dry and uninteresting like the movies. I mean, I was only really reading these things because they were famous and I wanted to see why they were famous. But I was pleasantly proven wrong. Despite the problematic parts of the relationship I mentioned earlier, these two had actual chemistry. Edward had a distinct personality, and it was fun to read his interactions with Bella on the page. I could actually see them falling in love, despite Edward's massive shortcomings, because they had fun together. So when getting ready to make this video, I thought, How am I going to judge this character if in the books and movies he's two different people? Well, luckily, despite these massive differences in personality, book Edward and movie Edward do follow the same arc. The exact same events and actions happen across both, so that's how we're going to judge the whole of his character. So after he meets Bella, what happens next? How does Edward's character change? Well, after falling in love with her, he became even more obsessed, if that was even possible. The two were joined at the hip, always hanging out with each other and almost never anyone else. It definitely gave codependency vibes, but again, that's a topic for another day. A massive event that shifted the couple's dynamic happened at the end of the first movie. In it, Bella's life was put in danger by an evil vampire, and Edward's family had to save her. After that, Edward realizes her being in his life is too dangerous, and he breaks up with Bella. In the months after, he spends time traveling the country trying to forget her, but he can't. Then when his family member Alice sees Bella dying in a vision, he believes she has passed away. Unable to live without her, Edward travels to Rome to confront the Volturi, the vampire rulers of the world. That's one of the only ways a vampire can off themselves because they're essentially unkillable unless another vampire does it. Man, I need a minute with that one. You're telling me after this ancient man meets a bland 17-year-old and dumps her, he no longer has anything to live for? There are no hobbies to go back to, family dynamics to maintain. Remember, he has an entire family over there. Or jobs he has within the vampire community? That's just sad. Throughout the whole Twilight series, we don't learn a single thing about Edward except that he loves Bella and hates his own existence. Now, don't get me wrong, a good writer could still work with this. Maybe the fact that in public he's always forced to read everyone's minds has made him a severe social recluse. However, that's not the conflict that is implied in the books. Most of the time, Edward only seems mildly annoyed at the mind-reading thing.
No, what he's actually upset about is that he's a vampire, and therefore a monster undeserving of love.
Jeez, get over it. I mean, I know you're supposed to be frozen at 17 and a little immature and stuff, but Jesus Christ. How has his family not staged an intervention? This boy needs help. He doesn't need a girl to terrorize. He needs friends, hobbies, and some damn self-assurance. What this man is willing to do for his girl is not romantic. It's concerning. No, beyond concerning. It's a cry for help. Surely, though, after the incident in Rome where Bella had to save Edward, he'd realized that he should have more to live for. Maybe he'd change and become a better partner, not this obsessed loser. Well, no, not really. When Edward comes back, they basically pick up where they left off. I mean, Bella's resistant to get back together with him because he hurt her, but it's nothing a few apologies won't fix. But there's still time for him to have an arc. There's still hope. What about the big snow fight where that one vampire chick was after Bella? No, all that really happens there is he becomes unlikely allies with Jacob in order to protect the girl they both love. Then after that, they immediately go back to hating each other. Well, what about... Come to think of it, there really aren't that many major events that happen in this series. The books are a whole lot of dialogue, and the movies are a whole lot of nothing. That doesn't really do well for character arcs. Also, another thing to consider is that Edward doesn't really have a reason to change. I mean, he gets everything he wants without really having to try. Bella accepts everything that he is immediately without question, even the darkest, most problematic parts. Why change if the one you love most accepts you anyway? At the very least, though, his character is consistent. I'll give him that. He's overprotective and slightly unhinged throughout most of the books and movies. There is one event that rubs me the wrong way, though. One I did not mention in the Bella versus Elena video, but I'm going to talk about it now. The baby. Yeah, we're talking about that. Oddly enough, it's relevant to Edward's character. When Jacob imprints on Bella and Edward's daughter, it leaves everyone in shock. Heck, Bella even gets to have a reaction to this. In both the books and movies, she lunges at Jacob, ready to end his existence. But guess who holds her back? Yeah, Edward. I'm sorry, excuse me? You're telling me this man who is so devoted to Bella that he is willing to unalive himself for her, whose every waking moment is spent obsessing over her, is okay with his infant daughter, their infant daughter, being promised to Jacob? The same Jacob who was just in love with Bella. This is jarring in the movies, but it is especially jarring in the books, considering how much more obsessive he is in those. No. This does not make any sense. Edward should be livid about this realization. He wouldn't hold back Bella. No, he would tell her to step aside so that he can unalive Jacob himself. Screw the rules of imprinting, screw the fact that Jacob can't help it. Edward would not give a single crap about that. There would be a fight, and only one of them would come out alive. You cannot convince me of any other outcome. Just what the hell was going on with that scene? Definitely the worst in the series, obviously. Everybody talks about it. Deep breaths, Renee. Deep breaths. Whoa, I got heated there, didn't I? But I do have a point with this. In this moment, it felt as if Edward's character was assassinated. I mean, he never had much substance before, but at least we knew what he stood for. It felt like the author just made him okay with that situation because she wanted the baby plot to happen. Yeah, that's probably how it went down, come to think of it. I cannot think of any other reason Edward would not absolutely destroy Jacob in that moment. So if I could describe the characterization of Edward in a few words, it'd be uneventful, unfortunately. He started with so much potential at the beginning, but the author didn't really do anything with it. He didn't learn to correct his problematic behavior, he didn't learn to live for something other than Bella, he just got everything he wanted. It's a shame, really. Edward was one of my favorite characters in the first book, but in the end, it became hard to root for him. Up until the baby incident, he was relatively the same character as the first book, and after the baby, well, you heard that whole rant. His character's believability went down the toilet. But enough about that. This Edward discussion has gone on a lot longer than I thought, but I don't regret it. There was a lot to cover. Now that we know his story, what about Stefan? Is he better? Worse? About the same? Let's find out. Stefan Salvatore. Just to let you all know, unlike with Twilight, I actually did not read all the Vampire Diaries books. From what I've heard though, the show deviated massively from the books, unlike Twilight, whose events actually stayed relatively the same. So for Stefan's character study, we will only be analyzing the show. I believe that's more than fair, as the show, even if I combine the books and the movies of Twilight, has way more content than Twilight anyway. Stefan is a 170-year-old vampire from the fictional town of Mystic Falls, Virginia, who's forever frozen at the age of 17, even though he looks like a 26-year-old. Honestly, all the actors across Twilight and the Vampire Diaries have this problem, but I digress. Stefan came of age during the time of the Civil War, and was turned into a vampire by he and his brother's shared lover, Catherine Pierce. After many years away from home, Stefan returned to Mystic Falls to visit his distant relative, Zach, and upon his return he rescued a girl whose family's car drove off a bridge. He did not have time to rescue her parents, but he made sure to save her. However, when he pulled the girl out of the water, he noticed that she bore a striking resemblance to Catherine. Like, they looked exactly the same. From there on out, Stefan decided to make a home for himself in Mystic Falls and enroll in the local high school, all to get to know this woman and see what relation she has to his previous flame. As you can see from the very beginning, Stefan's story is similar to Edward's. Vampire who drinks animal blood settles in a town, sees girl, becomes obsessed. Their reasons for becoming obsessed are vastly different, but those general plot points remain the same. However, after this point, after Stefan meets Elena, their stories diverge in a massive way. Enter Damon. Wondering why he's returned to their hometown, Stefan's estranged brother Damon tracks him down and begins wreaking havoc on the locals. He quickly finds the reason for Stefan's return, Elena, and also becomes obsessed with her. Stefan tries to get his brother to leave, but due to the fact that Stefan only drinks animal blood, he is not strong enough to stop Damon. This is not a Twilight situation where drinking animal blood is a discipline one must simply get used to. In the Vampire Diaries, doing that makes one much weaker than those who feed on humans. As a result, the first season features a massive back and forth between the two brothers. Stefan is the good brother who doesn't want to hurt anyone, and Damon is the evil brother who unalives people left and right. Stefan does his best to protect Elena from the conflict with his brother, but of course she quickly finds out what they both are. At first she is terrified, but when Stefan gives her time to process and reassures her he's on her side, she falls for him. Elena quickly turns from simply a girl who looked like Catherine to the most important person in Stefan's life. Of course though, this happiness is doomed not to last. After their first night together, Elena discovers a picture on Stefan's desk. It's of Catherine, and the resemblance is uncanny. Naturally, this makes her assume that the only reason he fell for her is because she looks like Catherine, and this causes major conflict. What I described is just the beginning of the show. A lot, and I mean a lot, happens throughout the Vampire Diaries. Love triangles, drama, death, you name it. I could not possibly summarize it all in this one video, so I'm just going to give you the highlights, particularly relating to Stefan's character, and how he changes throughout the narrative. The key to any great character arc is change. With setup like that, Stefan's character is bound to go through great change, and if you're assuming that too, you'd be right, actually. Through Elena's love, Stefan realizes that he always deserved much better than Catherine, who was a selfish lover that wanted to have both brothers. When Catherine eventually returns to Mystic Falls, he tells her how he feels, and that is a liberating moment for him. Already, unlike with Edward, we're seeing a lot of moving parts in Stefan's arc. He has a more defined backstory, a significant relationship that isn't based on his love interest, and growth as a person. If change like this continued throughout the series, we'd have a very obvious winner to this comparison. Unfortunately, that's far from the case. Enter Klaus. After the arc with the originals, incredible story by the way, that deserves its own video, Stefan is forced to make a deal with Klaus, the oldest and most powerful vampire in the world, to save Damon. The terms of this deal? Stefan must turn his humanity off and become Klaus's evil sidekick. He must leave his pacifistic vampire lifestyle behind and become a killer again. This is significant for Stefan because before he converted to the animal blood lifestyle, he was a serial unaliver, ending the existences of hundreds of people. It was only through the help of his best friend Lexi that he even managed to get out of that. And Lexi's not around anymore. Trust me, we'll talk about her later in the Damon video. But my point is, if Stefan gave in to his demons again, he might not be able to come back, because no one else could bring him back. However, because of his love for his brother, Stefan felt like he had no choice but to accept this deal. When I first saw this arc, I was super excited. Seeing Stefan forced to confront the worst parts of himself is peak drama, and it's bound to change him greatly. I also like the twist that he's not some goody two-shoes vampire. In fact, when compared directly to his brother, he's actually unalived more people. So who's the more evil one? I don't know. That's interesting. It has a lot of avenues for growth. So, what did the writers do with this golden opportunity? How do I even explain this? Okay, so it turns out that the phrase turning off one's humanity was less of a metaphor for confronting one's demons and more of an actual literal switch in the brain. Yes, there is an actual switch, like some invisible switch in a vampire's brain that if they turn it off, they just don't feel emotions anymore. It can just be evil without restraint. This one detail ruined everything. Throughout this arc, Stefan acts like a complete jerk to everyone around him, including Elena, because he can't feel anything. There's hardly any back and forth or wrestling with his demons because his humanity is off, so he doesn't have feelings anymore. Are you kidding me? The writers had a golden story sitting on a silver platter for them, and this is what they do with it? Of course the main characters eventually get Stefan to turn his humanity back on through the power of friendship and all that, but because all his actions were portrayed as not his fault, quote unquote, due to the switch being flipped, he basically goes back to the person he was before. The only real consequence for his actions I can even think of is that Elena fell for Damon instead, because Stefan, treated her so poorly and Damon was there for her and all that stuff. But that's it. This arc was a huge disappointment and waste of time, and unfortunately for Stefan, it does not get better after this. The rest of the show is a cesspool of villains of the season and vampire characters losing their humanity, then coming back to their old selves the same as they were before, because their transgressions are treated like not their fault. No one does this worse than Damon, but that's a topic for another video. Meanwhile, Stefan, after he loses Elena to Damon, seems to lose a lot of his character as well. When I tell you guys, I can barely remember a single significant thing that happens to Stefan after season 3. I'm not kidding. Most of the show is still fresh on my mind because I recently did a rewatch, yet I still cannot remember anything of significance that changes Stefan's character beyond that point. There's the Hunter arc, which is all about Damon, them trying to rescue Damon and Bonnie from that alternate dimension, which again is all about Damon, and there's also that time where their mother returned, and you guessed it, that arc is about Damon too. Stefan actually accepts his mother very quickly, despite her transgressions. After Damon becomes the main love interest, all the focus falls on him, and Stefan becomes an afterthought. Sure, he becomes best friends with Caroline, and eventually they fall in love, but even that is lacking impact. It doesn't feel like they make each other better, or that they even have a good reason to be together. She was just there, and Stefan didn't really have anyone else. By the end of the show, I can't even really define what type of character Stefan is. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he redeemed? Is he not? No idea. And I don't think the writers knew either. I guess he became more confident and finally learned how to drink human blood in a controlled way, but that happened many seasons earlier, way before the ending of the show. Not to mention, just like with other vampires, he fell off the wagon multiple times when turning off his humanity and hurt countless people. Don't worry though, that's not his fault. It's the humanity switch. Come on, this is such lazy writing. Clearly the writers wanted to have their cake and eat it too, so they kept making their characters evil and then changing their minds about it and resetting them back to before. This destroyed Stefan's character, and by the end, especially when he ended the existence of Bonnie's lover Enzo, I was done. Poor Bonnie deserves so much better, oh my gosh. To make things worse, I didn't even care when Stefan sacrificed himself to destroy Catherine once and for all. Part of me thought, finally, he gets what he deserves. I didn't want to think that way, but I'd seen him hurt too many people and not take any accountability for it to feel otherwise. Say what you will about Edward, but at least his transgressions were his fault. There wasn't some BS humanity switch at play. I swear, that is the worst system I've ever seen put in place in a show. The humanity switch ruined so many characters, almost all the main characters, you could actually argue. The worst love interest. Alright, that was a heck of a lot of content. I appreciate all of you who have stuck with me this far. There is so much to cover with these men, but I feel like now we finally have enough information to come up with a decision. As an author, I like to break down characters using very specific traits. I then give a general estimate of how this character performs at these traits on a 1 to 10 scale. Those traits are personality, backstory, hobbies, goal, and change. If you want more information on how I scale each of these, watch the Bella vs. Elena video. Let's start with Edward. Personality. Bland in the movies, fun in the books, so I'm giving it a solid 5 out of 10. Backstory. Interesting. His family are actually the most interesting characters, especially how they all met. I didn't get to cover it much in this video, but just know that's affecting this ranking for sure. I just wish the movies covered it more. 8 out of 10. Hobbies. He liked Linkin Park in the books. He loved fancy cars too. I guess that's something. 3 out of 10. Goal. I won't sugarcoat it, this one is bad. His whole existence is based around a girl, and I'm not giving lenience for that just because he's a man. Any character who does this, regardless of gender, will get a bad score. 1 out of 10. Change. Not good. Edward didn't have a reason to change much, and then his character was assassinated for a terrible plot. 2 out of 10. Next is Stefan. Personality. Kind of boring, honestly. I don't know if it's how the actor played him or if it's just the writing. Honestly, it's probably both. Either way, this gets a 4 out of 10, only because I liked him when he played a villain, even though the reasons behind it sucked. Backstory. Also interesting. We get a ton of details as the show goes on, and it affects Stefan's character greatly. You know, when he's not being ruined by the humanity switch. Honestly, this deserves a high score, 9 out of 10. Hobbies. Wow, I can't actually think of anything. What does he do outside of his love interests and helping save the day from the villains? I remember him being on the football team that one time, but I think that was just to show off. Maybe there's something small, but the fact I can't remember any of it is not good. I have a very good memory. 1 out of 10. Goal. This one is also not good. At the beginning, his goal is centered around Elena, and at the end, well, he didn't really have much of a goal, did he? To survive, I guess? He also wanted to help his brother. They had that whole brotherly bond thing going on. That too feels weak though, especially since Elena took over Damon's redemption halfway through the show. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, I've got nothing. If you remember something, please let me know in the comments. 2 out of 10. Change. As we said earlier, Stefan changed for the worse. He had a good start in the beginning, but that went downhill so abysmally. I can't give it any higher than a 1. I'm sorry, guys. Ready to tally the scores? These two are actually a lot closer to each other than Bella and Elena were, so I'm excited to see who comes out on top. Edward's total is a 20 out of 50 or a 40%, while Stefan's is an 18 out of 50 or a 36%. They're both better than Bella, I'll give them that, but it's not by much. Honestly, I feel more sadness for how these characters turned out than Bella and Elena, because they started with so much more potential. I guess Edward is our winner though. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that, but in investigating for this video, I realized Edward's character was butchered much less than Stefan's, especially in later movies, later seasons, you know, whatever. And this is unrelated, but on the previous video I had a lot of people commenting about who was morally better. That's not the point of these videos, guys. It's about character development. But if y'all want me to answer that question, who is morally the better character, who's more good, it's Edward. It's obviously Edward. He would beat Stefan by a massive margin. He's not, you know, a literal serial unaliver. I mean, he was a long time ago, but he changed his ways and stuff. It's not as much as I can say for Stefan. But I don't judge these characters based off of how good or bad they are, only by how believable and consistent their development is. A character could be super evil and still be an amazing character. If you made it to the end of this, wow, dang, very long video, first of all, damn, you love this topic as much as I do. Second, you are now my favorite person. You have helped me in the algorithm so much. It looks like I'll be covering vampire topics often on this channel because you guys are like totally eating this up. So drop your ideas for the next video in the comments. I'm certainly going to be doing an entire dedicated video to Damon in the next month or so. Unlike in these comparison videos, I believe he deserves a video all to himself. I have a lot to say about him. So if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. That tells me that you guys want more content like this. With that, I hope I've inspired you, and I'll see you in the next video. If you check out my writing, you will not see male characters like Edward and Stefan. I take great care to make all my characters unique and well-developed. So if you want to see that, check out Life Amongst the Giants. It would mean the world to me if you did.